Greetings RC fans. As you can no doubt tell from the voice, it's not Sharky. This particular episode is brought to you by Kel. Obviously the United Kingdom's currently in the midst of a second lockdown. Now just prior to the start of that, my good friend Sharky came to deliver my Christmas present very early. And I'm going to share that with you now. He got himself into quite a bit of bother by dropping off this box. Now I'm quite sure a good many of you already have a fairly good idea what may be contained within this box of wonders. Now, to give you some idea about me, I am very much a novice in regards to RC, so this is going to be a journey I'd like you to join me on. Very important, we'll put that to one side. Now, as I'm quite sure a good many of you can already tell exactly what this is. This is a C24 in its fabulous kit form. Now, I know there are a good number of people that would say potentially not a fantastic place for a beginner to start. However, I do at least have some background in building things. Now obviously this is a goodly number of pieces, and the first stage of any task like this is organising them all, particularly this little bag. Oh yes. So we'll start with that. Keep watching. So there are certain bits we're not going to need straight away, so I'm going to pop those off to one side. Ah yes, I'm going to be having fun with these, but that's going to be part and parcel of a different video. See, one of the things I do is I paint Wargames miniatures. I do that quite a lot, and I'm sure Sharky will put a link to my Instagram somewhere down there. So he's very good like that. Let's start with all of the good mechanical bits. Now of course, me being me, I do tend to keep things like box cutters and pots to organise these things to hand. So I'm going to quickly refer to my instruction sheet to see how many of each type I have. So I should have 70 of the little ones. This will take a while. So let's start getting some packaging open. So if I understand this correctly, that gets dropped into there. Well, that's a promising start. Spring then seems to go in, according to the other little diagram I have here. And then this cap sits over the top and clips. And that certainly does seem to work. Excellent start. Now I've just got to repeat that 3 more times. So, first part of the assembly is done. Ooh, marvellous. So the next part it is quite keen for me to do is, give me for 1 second, consult the master words. So from this, it seems the next part it wants me to do is to attach the shock struts that I've just made directly onto the frames. So align that correctly, and it looks to wish it to be aligned to this hole. a little bit of rattle in there. I understand that there should be a tiny touch of play. However, the noise of that is going to annoy me. So, I'm going to make the first of probably a few modifications that's going to happen throughout this. Bear with me. So what I've got here is a small sleeve of heat shrink. All I'm doing is making some small flexible washers. So effectively what I shall do is taking the shock strut and taking my camera will focus for me, small piece of heat shrink. I'm going to place it over the stump, and what you'll see is that actually fits nicely within inside the hole. And all that's going to do is that's just going to help take out some of the rattle. It's not going to change the movement within the hole, it just takes out some of the rattle. And I'm going to do that to all four. To take this piece now, the picture here is a little unclear. I'm going to assume that it wishes the hollow side upwards, just from what I can get on from the picture, and that fits with its slightly raised lip in the center piece in the center of the three holes to allow screws to go in the outer two. This I-beam that I'm working on at the moment, as best as I can ascribe it, seems to be the part that forms the rear frame of the chassis. One of the next parts it wants me to put on is this piece. Now, as I look at this, let me just examine my diagram. Pop this down for just a second, just so I can see how the motor sits in. that will sit in like so. So to suggest that that should be that way around, with the motor to the rear of that side, or that way. So that would place this that way around, and yep, the holes all do nicely line up for that to be the case. So let's screw this in. That screw hole doesn't seem to want to play, not just to get it to bite. Sometimes that's the way of it with self-tapping screws, such as these. You sometimes do have to sort of try and hold it in place so you can get a screwdriver on it. That looks to be what I'm having to do here. That one on as well. So we're starting to get the very basis of a chassis at this point. And the final frontier of this is this servo tray. Which, as I see it, the servo drops in. As I see this servo drops in inside and I may be wrong. Aha. Pushes in inside that hole there, which means that that sits to the front. I'll just pop the servo back out for a minute. So I have a sneaking suspicion there's routings for wirings and so on going on in there that I'm completely missing at this point. But that would suggest that this frame sits like so. It's held on by two screws here and here. So we'll make that a thing. And then once I've got the nuances of the frame together, I'll look at adding the other bits that the diagram wants me to add. So that's the first screw just holding it in place for me for a second. And we'll just pop the second screw into situ. Okay, that looks pretty successful so far. Now all I need to do is repeat the success on this side. and hopefully everything will all line up, and we shall have a nice solid chassis. Well, so far so good, it's looking promising. Now, at the start of this video I did say I was a complete novice to RC cars, and in a way that is sort of true. I mean, over the years I have had a few toy radio controlled cars over the years. Nothing like this, and certainly I've never done one as a kit from scratch. So this aspect of it is completely new to me. I have had a couple of ready to runs, you know, out the box, stick some batteries in it, and you're good to go. And don't get me wrong, I've had a fair bit of fun with those. However, I actually enjoy baking. I really enjoy making stuff. So this, to be perfectly honest, is probably one of the most fun bits, I think. And previously I've not done that. In part it's been a case of I've not had the time, or I've not had the space. I'm now very much blessed in so much as screw me a bit for freedom. I now have the workbench that you see before me, part and parcel of my quite generously sized workshop. There we go. That's it biting now. Every now and again you just get a screw that just does not want to play, and this seems to have been this one. There we go. So just the two for the rear peg to deal with. Once again, another screw making a bid for freedom. Part of the reason why I'm doing it on this workbench and nowhere else. And guarantee where it goes from here. And underneath this workbench is a concrete floor, so it's not going to get lost in the piles of a carpet, even if it does somehow manage to make its way to the ground. And there we have it. Chassis ready to rock and roll. So, according to this diagram, there are a few other bits and pieces that get added into this. Notable ones being the gearbox gets dropped into place. This servo gets dropped into place. Now, the one thing it doesn't tell me about is anything to do with the routing for that servo. Now, I was struggling to get this in earlier, and I'll show you why. If I can get my camera to focus on it, you may or may not be able to see. In this recess in here, there's actually a a wall here which holds this lug snugly, and it stops the whole servo from rattling, but it does make it a little tricky to initially put it in. So far so good. Components are happening. Feels I need components from this bag now. I'll need those for a while. Does, however, feel I need this part. Now that, as I understand it, and this part go hand in hand together. They screw together like so, to give you that nice aggressive looking front that this has. I'm presuming the differences in the diagram are based on the fact that this is the second iteration of this kit, which in its drive shafts and so on has metal gears and so on, as opposed to the first iteration of this kit which didn't. And I understand the front end was slightly different, and it didn't have the very cool bumper, which is, I believe, a component from a different kit. However, it also wants me to pull out some of the transparency from the So let's do just that. I still don't need this bit just yet. Quite some time before I require that part as well. But let's open up the other transparencies. What I shall do is I shall grab one of my spare parts. Those clear bits that I'm not using in there. So what we've got is we have clear piece, window, and that just slots in and pushes neatly in like so, and the same on the opposite side, just pushes in and pushes neatly so. I rather suspect when it comes to putting these LEDs in later, they're just going to push into there. Like so. And yeah, I can see straight away how that works. This is then held in place by a single screw. And that goes rather quite nice and snug. Additionally as well, what they've also included are these two little lovely bits, which just help give you that very cool look. Now, probably when I come to doing some painting with this, I shall probably tweak those up a touch. Now those, the diagram suggests, screw onto there. So what we'll do, let's screw this gearbox down first of all. I can't wait any longer before screwing the gearbox down when it comes to doing things like screwing the bumper on. It's going to cause me a few problems. So we'll get that down nice and tight. Because let's be perfectly honest, that's rather the heart of this whole endeavour, is that little motor in there. Without that little motor in there being firmly attached to the chassis, nothing else really works. Now, there's a little tip for you. If you've got a non-magnetized screwdriver like this one, and a screw that you need to drop somewhere where you can't hold the screw, there's a little trick you can do. If you take a little blob of grease, like so, dip the tip of your screwdriver in it, what you can then do is then take your screw and your screw will now stay put not be stuck to your screwdriver, but it will give you a tiny little bit of adhesion, just enough for you to be able to get it into the bottom of a well and start tanning. It's an old engineer's trick, because invariably when people design objects, quite often they're not the people who have to build them. So, motor's nice and securely attached, that's pressed into place. It really seems we are cooking with gas now. Now it means I can turn the whole thing upside down without anything falling out, which of course makes attaching this a whole lot easier. And that grease trick, it's something you can apply in a good number of places. Of course, the thing to bear in mind, however, though, is that you want to try and avoid getting any grease onto the threads of any of the screws that you're working on, as that may help them come unstuck. So it's fairly important that when you do the grease to help it stick to your screwdriver, that it literally only hits the head. So that's just a thread or so in at the moment, just to get it into place. Now I'm only doing these with a manual screwdriver because these are self-tapping screws, going into fairly light plastic. And if you go in kind of aggressively with an electric screwdriver, you'll just end up ripping your thread, and you'll just end up trashing your plastics. Which of course is the last thing anybody wants to be doing. So it's there. That screw's still a little loose. So let's tighten that down. And there we go. Now there's a bit of flex in that, which will, I'm reliably informed, prove very useful later on. So now it is suggested, and that one being within this pack, being this. Now, from what I've seen of all of the builds, other people doing the build of this, because obviously this piece fits onto the top of here. Like so. However, all of the builds I've seen of this, everybody seems to try to get their electronics all underneath this cover. So I honestly don't think I'm quite ready for that cover to go on yet, but it does ask for it to go on here.